Anna Rose, when you first suggested today's guest on the Business of Biotech podcast, I have to admit I was a little bit skeptical.
I'm a little hurt to hear that because we've shared a wall for many, many years.
We have, and you've never given me a bad steer.
I'm getting the sense that meant less.
You've never given me a bad steer, but this was a long time. It's quite a while ago, weeks, months. I don't remember, frankly, but
Time flies.
I know. And I went and I checked out the founder's LinkedIn page, and it said something like founder of Schmader Schmerapeutics or something along those lines. And I was like, oh, what is this?
See, when I saw that, I was like, they need to be on the podcast. And if I had $1 million to give them, I would pay out of pocket for that.
I can see where you
I would have been your first funder just for that.
You're still taking more. So yeah.
Excellent. There we go.
Well, we'll get into that. It turns out that this was their stealth mode moniker, Schmader Schmerapeutics. And yeah, they're out of stealth mode now, and they're out of stealth mode with a bang. And my skepticism is entirely erased. The founders official were out of stealth mode post on LinkedIn, in fact, listed a veritable who's who of partners and supporters and advisors and people throwing money, space, and time at this company to advance its RNA therapeutics program. And our guests seem to have a pretty cool founding story to tell that I'm anxious to hear from them. Fresh off a Stanford PhD in bioengineering, Dr. Eerik Kaseniit is shaping his PhD project into a business in lockstep with CEO Sophia Lugo, who brings super interesting and multifaceted collection of private, public, and nonprofit life sciences leadership experience to the table. But I'm not going to tell the story here. We're going to invite them to. Sophia and Eerik, welcome to the show. We're honored to have you.
Yes, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us. We are so happy to be on Business of Biotech.
Business of Biotech was just named the top biotech podcast by FeedSpot.
I know, you're so fancy.
I don't know who FeedSpot is, but I was like, you give me a number one, I'm going to take.
You didn't pay them to do that.
Yeah. So yeah, we're super thrilled to have you. We're going to solidify our number one status, I'm sure, after this episode. Yes. Eerik, I want to start with you. I want to get the story behind the discovery that planted the seed, like dial way back, to the work you were doing in your PhD project.
You were born.
No, we're not going to go that far back. Although I'm sure there's an interesting story there too. Sure. What was it in your mind that sort of planted the seed, and then what generated this initial buzz?
Mm-hmm. We do have to go back a little bit. So I would go back to 2012. That was the summer of CRISPR. It was a very exciting time. I was an undergrad around then. And my summer project was to actually think about the same problem that's stuck with me for more than a decade now, which was how do we make an mRNA that could be controlled within a cell? That was a very exciting time. Like I mentioned, CRISPR had just come out to edit DNA. At the same time, actually, a slightly less known publication came out to show that you can also modify RNA in a guided fashion using ADAR enzymes, which you might get to later. And that summer, I was working in a lab as an undergrad and was right next to Moderna. So Moderna was actually a household name for us. So in my mind, RNA therapeutics was bound to be a platform, if not the platform. And it was built as the software for life. But as a computer scientist myself and a molecular biologist, I was like, well, if you only have a print statement, just make something. That's not quite what software is. You would want to do if then else statements and really control the flow of information and manipulate biology. So I was a card-carrying synthetic biologist, really thinking about how do we think of these tiny little machines that make up our body, and how do we fix when these little engines get broken? How do we fix them? mRNA seemed to be the great solution because an mRNA can be read by any cell, but that's also its weakness. You cannot control which cells get the fix. And so that summer, I spent a lot of time thinking, how can we take these genetic medicines, these new mRNA therapeutics that were bound to come out, of course, took a little bit of time for that to really emerge, but how do we take these mRNA medicines and control them? And to me, it was obvious that we needed this kind of layer of regulation. We needed to fix the right cells at the right time. We couldn't, take a chainsaw and do cell surgery. We needed a scalpel to really fix it. So I did take some detours after undergrad to be in the DNA world for a little bit, and did find myself at Stanford doing my PhD with Professor Xiaojing Gao. So when he came to me with this idea that, hey, I have this neat kind of invention where we could take an mRNA and regulate its expression so that only specific cells that we want to express that RNA, are expressing that RNA. I was a very prepared mind. I already knew that this was going to be the future. This was around 2021, 2022. When this was all happening. So, the vaccines were out, mRNAs as a medicine were already proven. But the next step would be, how can we regulate how these mRNAs are expressed? Yeah. So, that vision had stayed with me, and now we had a way to actually implement that vision. And it was later also very exciting to hear that Jim Collins over at MIT was also thinking about this problem the same way. And like I mentioned, I'm a card-carrying synthetic biologist, so to see that the father of synthetic biology was on the same wavelength as us was very exciting. So Jim and Xiaojing are both co-founders of the company, and that's just been very exciting. So yeah. In terms of buzz, when we put out the preprint describing this idea, we got calls basically the next day or emails from VCs, from companies looking to implement this technology and really wanting to see how do we take this technology and bring out the vision that was behind this idea of how do we regulate and control these genetic medicines more broadly.
Before those inbound calls and emails came in, were the wheels already turning in your brain that we're going to turn this into, we're going to take this to industry. This is going to be a science experiment.
For sure. I knew that this would be a therapeutic one day. I didn't know what route we would take there. So that was an open question. It was not my plan to go and start a company when I was going into grad school, but I was dipping my toes in understanding how does this all work? How do you take this science idea, maybe a preprint or a paper, and turn that into medicines? It's a long process. So I started educating myself on this aspect.
Yeah,
how to see it all the way through to the end, right? The basic science all the way through.
Yeah,
and that's where Sophia comes in, right? Like, Sophia, tell us in your words how and when you came on the scene.
Yeah. So I'd say my day one of grad school, of my MBA, I was very sure I wanted to start a company. Had a bit of an entrepreneurial bug because I'm a very passionate, ambitious, and stubborn person, and stubborn about how I want the world to look. And for me, healthcare access and equity have always been very important. And I can talk about that, but it is deeply personal to me. And the entrepreneurial bug, my family is entrepreneurial. We've always had a family business. My dad, started a farm from zero to what it is today when I was young. And it was an all hands on deck. Everyone's helping out back then. And, moving up to getting familiarized with the US healthcare system and feeling very passionately that it needed to change. I knew going into business school that that's what I wanted to do. So day one, I started getting very involved in everything that Stanford Business School had to offer for entrepreneurship, which is a lot. It is a great institution if you want to be an entrepreneur. As president of the Entrepreneurship Club, president of the Hispanic Business Student Association, I ended up working with a lot of PhDs and professors at Stanford on very exciting technologies, because at the time I was working at the Stanford Office of Technology Licensing in a program called the HIT Fund. And I believe it stands for High Potential Impact Translational Program, but I'm sorry, Natine, if I got that wrong, but HIT Fund. And the idea is that the HIT Fund is supposed to look at the most innovative, most promising, most popular by hits, by the amount of people that request these licenses, technologies coming out of Stanford. And I was the life sciences fellow. And so my job was get these Stanford technologies into the world. Part of that was assess commercial readiness, assess commercial opportunity, and then a lot of, okay, let's make the first pitch deck for this professor. Let's take them to their first VC meeting, or let's identify VCs that can actually work well with these professors, or other routes of funding. It does not have to be VC. Sometimes it was talking to PhDs and postdocs about what it would mean to start a company and what they had to think about. And sometimes it was doing customer discovery for them. So this was a really great opportunity because I had already heard of Radar. It was a very popular license, and I was primed to think about mRNA because I had recently been at the Gates Foundation, where I was partly responsible for setting up COVAX and figuring out the financial and operational risks, and then tracking COVAX supply chain manufacturing delivery. Part of that was mRNA vaccines. Super exciting time to be watching this new modality work at breakthrough pace through development and get emergency approval. So I was primed to really believe in the power of mRNA. I was also working on some companies on the side. So I'd been in 2 accelerators on different ideas around innovations I thought could be impactful. A mutual friend, Anna Julia, I must have mentioned RNA to her in my excitement about RNA, and she insisted that I meet Eerik, the best RNA guy she knew, who really wanted to start a company and was in a different class at Stanford about entrepreneurship. So Eerik and I did meet, and we had lunch the first time, and it felt like the right moment. I actually, in my open book bag, I had a book called The Genome Defense on the patent strategy that was crafted for AMP versus Myriad, in the case that decided that naturally occurring sequences of DNA could not be patented. And Eerik had worked at Council and had a lot of thoughts about Myriad. So we won't say them here, but we'll say we had a long discussion not about Radar even, but it was about science making, about our values, about our personal motivations, about what is the kind of world we want to see. We felt we had a lot in common. By the second meeting, we started talking about starting a company together. And then we took that process very seriously over a few months. We did actually a trial period of working together where we had a date on the calendar where we said, by this day, if it doesn't work out, we can say no hard feelings.
Cut the cord.
An
escape plan. Somebody texts you, I have an emergency at home, I've got to go.
Yeah. I mean, I remember actually on that day approaching the school, I'm like, well, I'm going to say yes. I hope he says yes.
Check yes or no. Will you be my partner?
Like, will you be my business partner? So that was a very exciting time. And my philosophy is always get the idea out there. I mean, you've got this great idea. I think it has immense potential. At the time, I'm also secretly diligencing Eerik. I'm trying to find out what do people who know him think about him? What do people think about his paper? I thought it was exciting. And I was a fellow at a few VCs at the time, working part-time for a VC and then working with 2 other VCs as a fellow. So I was familiar with some VCs that could help me diligence. I brought the paper to them and thought, I think this is exciting. I think this could make in vivo reprogrammability work for genetic medicines. What do you think? And they agreed. Like if you make this work, that is extremely exciting. So I did go through a process of vetting it. We put our pitch deck together and we just started working on crafting the story and crafting where it could actually be applied. Yeah, that's the story.
It's pretty wild.
I know. I love that it was so much about who you are as people. Right. And the world that you really wanted to build. It wasn't, let's just jump into this project and try to develop strategy right out the gate. Let's just talk science. Like it was literally about your interests, right? And who you are and what you want. For
sure. I think we should give Eerik a minute to talk about his vetting process.
Yeah.
Sophia, though. Like what sort of diligence were you running on Sophia at the time?
And secretly, was there ever a chance that you were going to check the no box, right? on the business? Shaking his head. Absolutely not.
Yeah. I think from the very first meeting, there was just a lot of mind melding and seeing that our vectors were just very aligned. And it was more just, getting to know each other. We went through lots of questions every day, almost every day. I would come from Berkeley to Stanford because that's where I've been living for a while. And I would sometimes call Sophia in the car, and we would go on walks on campus just to discuss these questions, these bigger questions, not always the technology, not always the plans, but these bigger questions like Sophia mentioned, because on my side of the story, I had taken this class, Lean Launchpad's kind of startup on guardrails, and you were doing customers discovery, thinking about the business plan, and the main value I got of it, I think, is not having to pace around the room for 5 minutes before I pick up the phone to call someone, because as part of it, you have to do 100 conversations over 10 weeks with folks, and that gave me a lot of confidence. But as part of those conversations, I also talked to a lot of founders, and it's been really great to have to be in the Bay Area, because I feel like every founder here has been super generous with their time and sitting with me for up to 3 hours just to like give advice and feedback and share experiences. So I talked to folks who had kind of gone at it solo, had co-founders with them, understand the dynamics, things that went well, things that didn't go well. So that's just been my approach, like really, strong preparation, understand what I'm getting into.
Sorry, go ahead. I was just going to ask, like, what were some of the go-to questions or pieces of information you wanted to know, right, from Sophia? What were your go-tos, right, that you had learned from other CEOs and co-founders that kind of helped you inform, yeah, I'm gonna check yes on this box, right? This is the company for me.
Yeah, there's actually a few resources we leveraged on these questions. There's a co-founder matching questionnaire that's out there for one of the VCs. That's about 50 questions, and you go through it, and it's really everything about how you think about setting up the company, how do you think about conflict resolution, how do you think about bringing in new people, expertise from the outside. There's a million choices you have to make, in the lifetime of the company, and how do you go about making these choices? What's the kind of North Star, the ground truth that you always lean on? So we just kind of discussed a lot on the past experiences. I wanted to see like how Sophia dealt with challenges or sought them out, and I think the very first thing that maybe I actually haven't shared with you, but I think it was like day 2 or 3 where we were working on a one-pager description of the company, and we were working on it, and I think we were kind of like mid-sentence, typing something out, and Sophia was like, "All right, let's go to the business school quad and just talk to people, see if this resonates." And like that kind of go-getter attitude was actually what kind of already, but in some ways, checked the box with me. Most of the rest of the discussions were, identifying any red flags, but also understanding how to work with someone. Like in the future, when things are going to be a lot more intense, a lot more involved, a lot more high stakes, a lot less time to think about things. Can we use this time right now to really get to know each other, how we communicate, how we disagree? Actually, we tried to have a little bit of a disagreement on, how much should we raise? Just something that was so far ahead of us that it didn't quite matter. But I wanted to see like how do we work through it. I think we were seeing where we pulled these plans, so that it's not just all kind of fun and but actually working through a model conflict in a way that was kind of low stakes in some ways, but to understand how do we come out of it the other way, because I think having heard that co-founder dynamics are just so important for the success of a company, that was really important for me, because my job is to make sure that we actually make it through all the way and grab the right people, and so
yeah. It sounds like there's the combination of your individual and collective ambition and diligence is a key element of this. Sophia, the programs that you're referencing from Stanford, I imagine that there are a bunch of jealous listeners right now, aspirational, would-be first-time founders who are thinking back to their PhD projects and the institutions they went to. They've told me, I mean, they've been on this very podcast, I've heard it time and time again, that the translation, I don't mean translational science, I mean the translation of a concept to industry and the support to enable and nurture that translation is missing. And like I said, big, I'm not going to name names, but big public, and private important research institutions. Sounds like Stanford had that in spades. I mean, it sounds like Stanford, supported the mission from the outset.
Yes, I do have to say so. At least from my vantage point, particularly at the business school, it helps when, I joined the school and I'm so sure I want to start a company, and I am not an uncommon story. I mean, I think the entrepreneurship club is the biggest club. A lot of my, I had, maybe not in biotech, but for my immediate class, a huge network of CEOs of other people founding companies. We have, I had my professors in licensing negotiations were also on the phone when we had to negotiate our first license. I have my professor in VC on the phone when we have to negotiate the first term sheet. We have the world's best people. And I think that's a common theme. If you can't control biology, you can definitely control the caliber of people that you have around you. And you have to, like Eerik said, you have to be willing to pick up the phone and ask them. But there's at Stanford, people are so primed to do that. I'll also say that it's also true for Berkeley. Stanford and Berkeley, I think people are so primed to help. I had another professor, Howie Rosen, who's been a CEO and chairman of several biotech, biopharma companies. And he was also there to help me on this very specific journey, think about how to think about things. And VCs as well. Our first engagements with VCs were all very much advice seeking. The VC they have an incentive to work with you and to help you figure this out and start to form a relationship, whether for this company or the next. And I had, several VCs that really spent a lot of time with us thinking about, well, you have a platform, where are you going to point it? This is how we can think about it. We bounce back and forth on our thinking. So really being able to pull in all that support has been really important for us. And yeah, Stanford and the entire environment of Silicon Valley has been super helpful.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Eerik.
Yeah.
I'll mention that I think one time you were on the phone with one of these professors at like 10 p.m. I was at a rock concert and you were texting me a lot. So on the notes.
He was at a dinner party, but I was like, we have to do this negotiation tomorrow. And he's like, I'm at a dinner party, but let's get on the phone. So yeah,
Operation Dinner Party.
Yeah, that's a community that's in the Bay Area. Yeah, not just Stanford, but also Berkeley. We're very glad to be in Baker Labs, which is an incubator facility here in Berkeley, and they have a great network of advisors that we've roped on officially as well that can really help you, get off the ground to begin with.
And we should mention Svetlana here.
Yeah,
Svetlana on before me.
Yeah, Svetlana Lucas, actually the CBO at Scribe Therapeutics, was actually one of the advisors in the Lean Launchpad class that I took. And just volunteering her time to help these students kind of do a mock startup. Of course, this idea ended up being a real company, and she's an advisor to us now as well. But just this generosity and time has been wonderful. I have no idea how these people find the time, because they're negotiating all these complex transactions and doing the actual work they need to do, but also making sure that they help this next generation of folks and pass on their knowledge and wisdom and experiences.
Yeah. You've both referenced some resources that you've sought out on your own, aside from the sort of infrastructure there at Stanford. What advice would you give to the folks who I referenced earlier, who maybe don't have so much resource immediately available to them in their quest, in terms of going out and seeking out advice and guidance on things, early thinking around IP protection and VC engagement, and even moving towards like early CMC decisions and manufacturability? Like, do we have something that we think is even worth taking that next baby step? Can you rattle off maybe any resources that might be available to people who don't have them handy?
Yeah, I think when you're a founder, you are likely a person who has identified a problem or been very close to a real problem. So you have been close to people who have been affected by the problem, have tried to solve the problem, are solving the problem, or might have really good expertise and be unaware of the problem, but you have probably been around those people. And so beyond the infrastructure, I think as a founder, or as an executive, you have to bring your whole network into the endeavor. And so even beyond the Stanford community, I had my very first job was in biotech. It was actually in China at BGI Genomics. And my boss at BGI Genomics, the head of the health division at the time, Ko Chin, hi Ko, I'm going to send you this podcast. But he, now he's a managing director at Eisai Innovation, and he's been an operator, he's been a founder, he's been an investor, he's been on the pharma side, he's been on the traditional institutional investor side. So he has a lot of experience, and I've been so surprised every time I pick up the phone. He's like, if he can't talk to me then, he calls me back in 5 minutes, and he takes the time. He was also one of the people that was looking at Eerik's paper, telling me like, idea.
Vetting.
So, but he's from a past experience. I think biotech is it's a very complex field. You do have to have a reason to be in the position that you're in. I think it is really hard, and it needs the proper set of experiences around the table. So anyone in a founder position or executive position has a set of experiences, have to be willing to go back to them. So Co has been like a guardian angel in this process, walking me through this is how pharma thinks about it. This is how institutional investors will think about it. This is how you have to think about it as an operator in his experience. Others from my life too, my manager from Gates Foundation, also on the phone with her, she has a lot of experience. I really believe in health equity. So how do we innovate in a way that's scalable? She brings in her deep experience on design. My undergrad lab PI, I get on the phone and I call him and see what he thinks about it. And he's an innovator in his own right. He identified GABA as a neurotransmitter. So he knows how to manage a lab. He knows how to parallelize experiments. He knows how to take calculated risk. And so you can bring all these elements of your life into it. You probably are 1 or 2 degrees away from somebody who is very deeply experienced in whatever problem you're facing. And as the company grows, our network multiplies. Everyone at the company comes with very, very deep experience or is highly connected. And then you bring on folks like Jim Collins. I felt like I needed to pinch myself when Jim agreed to join us as a co-founder because, he's the father of synthetic biology. And he either knows it better than anyone else or he can point us to the best expert. So yes, your network multiplies and you have to be willing to use it.
So not afraid, right? You have to put yourself out there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, that network growth, we could belabor the whole point. I want to get to the science.
Of course.
But I will say that the growth of the network doesn't happen unless you, to your point, put yourself on there. Sophia, I mean, I mentioned from the outset, has public, private, nonprofit, academic experience. Every single one of those experiences that you've had along the way has expanded that network, and you find yourself, I could look at it and go, well, I mean, Sophia brought those perspectives herself. Because she worked in all these places, but then it's the extension of that to the network. I mean,
and it's also being generous too, right? I mean, everybody was generous with you, and you will go on as well, hopefully.
Yeah.
And you are doing that right now, right? By also being generous with your knowledge. And it's, that's how medicines are made too. I mean, it's from a place of trying to improve access and make medicines for patients, but from a leadership perspective, it's the exact same thing, right?
Right.
That's what you're trying to do.
The quality of decision making, every decision in our industry is so expensive. The quality of the decision has to be really high. And so anyone, it doesn't matter if you're super experienced. I think everybody is best served by trying to gather as many perspectives as possible. It's our jobs as executives to synthesize that information and then make a calculated decision. But make the decision is our viewpoint. But yeah.